Major funding for these broadcasts is made possible by grants from New York Community Bank, Capital One Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, Chase Commercial Term Lending, M&T Bank, Genova Burns. Additional support is provided by AKA Hotels, Corman Communities, Aerial Property Advisors, AVR Realty Company, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Citizens Bank, Collins Building Services, Connect One Bank, CPEX Real Estate Services, Cushman & Wakefield, DDG, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development, Levine Builders, Fisher Brothers, First Nationwide Title Agency, Flushing Bank, Friedman, Handler Real Estate Organization, HAP Investments, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Center at Syracuse University, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Madison Realty Capital, Matone Group, Mercantile Commerce Bank, Meridian Capital Group, New Banks, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Rosewood Realty Group, SJP Properties, Sterling National Bank, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, Terra CRG, The Continuum Company, The Moynihan Group, and These Friends.
You know, Pacific Palisades, then private school, then Switzerland. Oh, nah. Family says, you got to go to Trinity. No, I want to go to Harvard. You got to go to Trinity. Goes to Harvard. I don't know. I'm not an investment banker. I got a job at Lehman Brothers. I'll meet Mr. Lehman. Forget that. Not a bad job. I'll learn a little bit about charity, a little finance, and I'll meet a guy who has a big family office, and maybe we'll run a couple of companies. Aunt Millie's Keebler, biscuit company. Nah, it's been good. Chairman of the board of an oil company. I'm 50 years of age. It's time to change. I'm going to get involved with an auction house, a place called Sotheby's. I'll get involved, I'll become chairman of Americas for Sotheby's. But during that, I got to really help the community besides all my charitable involvement. I got to be the auctioneer for all the major charities around the world. I have the preeminent auctioneer, Jamie Niven. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Very nice of you.
So, I think the name Niven, you were named after another Niven, correct?
Well, I had a father called Niven.
Dad was born in, 1900?
1910.
1910, and his father died when he was about 5, right?
Correct. He died in World War I.
Tell me about him growing up before he came to America.
Well, he went to Sandhurst, the English military college, and was commissioned to the Isle of Malta, which is in the Mediterranean, and he stayed there for 4 years. And then when he got out, he decided he hated being in the Army, and he resigned his commission, and he headed for the United States. And he was on a boat, obviously, in those days, and he arrived and he was picked up at the dock by a friend of a friend.
Right, Hemingway?
Yeah, he was called Jack Hemingway, not Hemin. Took him to lunch at 21, where Jack went all the time. And Pete Crindler, who was one of the owners, came up to Jack and said, "Who you got today? Who you got? Who's here?" "This is David Niven." "Ah, David Niven, what do you do?" He said, "I don't do anything. I just resigned my commission in the British Army." "Do you like wine?" "Yes, I do. I drink a lot of it." "Good, you're hired." And he hired him as a salesman in 21 Brands, which was the shop next door. And also he filled in at night as a sommelier. That was his first job in the United States of America.
So how did he end up in California?
He followed sort of the sun. I know that sounds rather hippie, but he was anything but hippie. But he got out there because someone had said to him, "You must come and visit me." I think it was Loretta Young who he met in New York, and he foolishly thought that was an offer, but it wasn't. And he got to California, and he got a job
On a boat, right?
on a boat, fishing boat, that would go out from San Pedro Island to the Catalina Islands. And he was sort of the deckhand to bait the fish and all that kind of thing, bait the line. And one day, Merle Oberon, who was a phenomenally famous actress at the time, chartered the boat. And she liked this deckhand, and they started going out together. And Merle was the reason why he went down to become an extra at the Goldwyn Studios. And he became what you and I refer to today even as an extra with a non-speaking part. That's how he started in the motion picture business.
And how do you progress?
He progressed very well.
Yes, I realize that.
He went on to make 100 movies. He took 6 years off to go back and fight in 1939. He went back.
Which you said in an article he never really spoke about.
Never.
When he came back.
No. He went and he was at Dunkirk and got off and got back to England and then went into D-Day 4 and fought through France, and then he was demobbed at the end of the war. So he then went back to California, had a rough time with his career, and it wasn't easy to get it.
Now, it was I think it was 1940 when he saw this very attractive woman.
Yes.
From England,
Yes.
and
Her name was Primula. You're close. He met my mother, and they got married. And my brother David was born in 1942, and then I was born in 1945, just after the war was over.
And then they come back and they move to Pacific Palisades.
Right.
And then this terrible accident
Right.
happened. Sardines?
Yeah, they were playing this silly game called
Tyrone
Sardines.
Power?
Tyrone Power's house, you got it. She fell down some stairs and had a terrible concussion and died 3 days later.
So you're 2 years of age. Your brother is 6 years.
So I'm 6 months.
Oh, well, you're 6 months.
David is about 2.5.
And you told me you really enjoyed the Pacific Palisades.
Yeah.
It was a great place. You played ball.
Yeah, everything, every sport imaginable. Yeah.
And you went to prep school.
I went to prep school in Concord, New Hampshire, a place called St. Paul's School, and stayed there for 2 years. Didn't really like it that much. My father now had moved to Switzerland, and he was my only parent, so I obviously moved with him. And I went to school in Lausanne, Switzerland, a lovely town on Lake Geneva.
A little skiing.
Oh, a lot of skiing. We lived up in the mountains, and the school went to the mountains for the whole month. I'm not saying it wasn't spoiled. And then we had a house in the south of France. So it was, again, hardly a rough upbringing, except my father wanted me to go to Trinity College, Cambridge, where my mother's family had gone for many generations. And I was perfectly happy to do that if I could get in. But I wrote a letter, believe it or not, when I was living in London, to UCLA and to what I referred to as a small liberal arts college in Cambridge, Massachusetts. UCLA turned me down flat.
And because you didn't realize you had
No.
to be a resident.
Well, I didn't realize.
I mean, they had certain quotas.
They did, but I didn't fit their quota. And Harvard, for whatever reasons, took me.
Now, Harvard took you in as a sophomore.
Correct.
Because they gave you credit for the programs.
Right.
And what you doing during the summers?
Went back to the south of France. Where do you think I would go? Went to the south of France.
Wait a second. You know, there's something called work.
Yeah, there is.
You graduate Harvard.
Yeah.
And then what do you decide?
I had worked for Lehman Brothers that summer before I graduated from college, and they very nicely offered me a job to come back. And I did. I went back, and I also got married kind of the same time.
You were working in like the corporate finance
Yes.
department of Lehman Brothers?
Yes. But remember, Lehman Brothers was an investment bank. It didn't need a lot of capital. They weren't taking positions. They were
And
just
it was a partnership.
partnership. They were on the hook. Every time you did an underwriting, they had to stand behind it. And we were investment bankers, and we gave advice to clients on how to do various things, including going public or buying another company or doing debt issues or whatever it was.
So what happens one day? Mr. Lehman says, I want to meet the younger kids in the operation?
My recollection is that I was asked to go down to say hello to him because I was a new employee. And he had known my father. And he asked me what I was doing in the not-for-profit world. And I looked at him like, he's from Mars. I had no idea what he was talking about. And he said, get involved with something when you're young, it's really good, and stick to it. And I went back to my office and asked the guy I was sharing with, what did you do when he told you that last year? He said, I got involved with the Memorial Sloan-Kettering Cancer Center. And so I went to a few meetings at Memorial Sloan-Kettering Cancer Center, and I thought it was an extraordinary institution, and I stayed at it, and I've been a trustee there for 38 years.
Now, besides that, there was another little museum
Yes,
you got
a
involved
little
with?
museum called the Museum of Modern Art. I did the same thing there. I got involved with them in something called the Junior Council, and I was allowed to go on the film committee, because MoMA has a big film committee, and I went on that 40 plus years ago.
Now, what I failed to say, okay, because there are 2 points that I have to bring up.
Yes, sir.
Now, you told me that you took the job with Lehman, but you had a job with CBS.
I had an offer.
And an offer at CBS,
Yes.
Mr. Paley was going to
Yes.
give you $5,000.
Yes, correct.
And you went for the money.
I did.
You went for the money.
I did.
And that was one story. And
Yes.
the other story is that when Mr. Lehman said to you, you have to get involved with philanthropy,
Yes.
you said that Dad was not really a major philanthropist.
Not at all. Zero, in fact. Maybe some work for the Screen Actors Guild, but I think if anything, he did some charity work for the home. But I don't remember anything else. No, that wasn't part of the
So you're at Lehman for about 5 years. And how do you meet your next stage of your career, your buddy?
There's a guy that I knew who had made some investments that weren't that great, and he had rather a large sum of money, and he wanted to get out of the bad investments and redeploy that money. So he offered me a job.
How'd you meet him? I mean, through.
Oh, I knew him. I knew him over the years. Played tennis with him or something. I got to know him. I knew his wife. I mean, it was a guy that was around.
So one of his companies was the famous Aunt Millie's. Tell me.
Correct. We had an opportunity to buy Aunt Millie's spaghetti sauce, which was a small regional spaghetti sauce that was for sale, and I rather liked the idea of it. And we bought it for what I thought was a reasonable amount of money. And then we plowed all the profits back in for the next 4 years and built this little company to become quite large.
But wasn't it because it was organic or natural?
Yeah, it was 100% natural. I didn't know that at the time, how important that was and how important it became later on in life. But at that point, 100% natural was, who cares? Except that you could do an advertising campaign and you could underline what the other chaps had in their sauce, and yours was 100%
And you
natural.
can compare. I mean,
We compared. And then we had a tagline which, Aunt Millie's, which one would you rather serve your family? Meanwhile, we'd underline lard and sugar and salt and MSG and terrible things the other people were putting in their sauce. And it did extremely well. I think a lot to do with that.
Then the biscuit companies?
United Biscuit came along, big English company. They own Keebler here. They own Spice Island here. And they made an offer to buy us, and I sold it reluctantly.
One company in the petroleum business,
Yes.
right?
Later on.
Which relates to something you were telling me when we got together about Singapore and your great-grandfather?
Yeah.
What was that story?
Well, I did the math again. I tried to make sure I got the right title for him because he was my great-great-grandfather, and he started a company in Singapore in 1828, which is still going, called Bowstead. And in those days, it was a cotton trading operation. Today, it's a large engineering company worldwide. And I never heard about this man or knew I even had a great-great-grandfather that had ended up in Singapore or whatever. And I got an email from a fellow who controlled the company and ran it in 2008, I think it was. And he asked me if I would come out for the 180th anniversary of the founding of the company. And he emailed me and said, this was started by your great-great-grandfather. So I thought it was sort of a joke. And I emailed him back, how's my company doing? And he emailed me back and said, I'm terribly sorry, you don't own any shares, but I do. And please come and maybe speak at the 180th anniversary. So I did. And I fired out there to Singapore, and I had dinner with him and his people the night before, where my great-great-grandfather had started this company on the river there. And I learned later on that he'd also been one of the 4 founders of the port of Singapore, which today is the second largest after Rotterdam. And I spoke that night in front of these 850 Singapore businessmen and women.
But you didn't own any of this, right?
Zero, sadly.
But you did tell me that when you were right shortly after Lehman, a couple of your friends, you made an investment in a real estate deal, something up in the Bronx.
I did.
I mean, which is interesting. That
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't even know what the Bronx was,
Probably not terribly well.
right? And somebody said to you, invest in this real estate deal.
You got a deal in those days, and it was all legitimate. It was, this was to encourage investment in a poor section of New York City, or a section that needed capital. And the result was that we invested in, we got a write-off, and I promise you, I never thought another thing about it. It goes to show you just never know in life. Anyway, so some years later, like last year, I get a call from the Two Trees office, which was the managing agent at the time, and
And this was going back 30 years, probably. At
75.
least. Oh, was it 40 years?
Yes. And they asked me if I would be willing to sell my share. And they were putting together the package of selling the units, and they did. And I didn't think very much of this. I thought if I got $10,000, I'd been really happy. But the strangest thing happened. I get a check from the guy at Christmas, and I had been out of town. I came back, and David Valentis is the name of the fellow. He's the one that started Dumbo. He's a wonderful developer, and I've known him all those years. And he sent me a note with his business card. It said, "Merry Christmas, Jamie." And the card was sort of clipped to the check. And I didn't see the actual dollar amount that he had sent me, because some of the card covered the left-hand part of the dollars. So I saw $19,000, and I went, wow, that's terrific. I'm so happy. And my assistant said, $19,000, you're not reading it right. It's $619,000. I said, wow.
So it's the question of real estate or art, which we'll get to in a second.
Yes, you can ask me either one.
So what happens now is, how do you get involved with the oil companies and the company?
Well, I'd invested some money in a smaller oil company in Houston, Texas, and we sold that company to a much larger company called Global Natural Resources. And then a group of us decided to get control of Global Natural Resources, which we did. And ultimately, I became the executive chairman of the company and spent a lot of time in Houston in those first 3 years. Then I remained chairman for another 2, and then a year later, the company was sold to a company called Ocean Drilling, excuse me, and that in turn was bought by Devon, which is the biggest independent in the country.
So what happens? You're 50 years of age, you
Yep.
said? You've made a couple of dollars in
Yes.
some businesses.
Yes.
And it's time for a change.
Yes.
So what happens?
Well, first of all, my wife and I have been married for that point in time a very long time, because we got married in 1968, had reluctantly decided to get divorced, which was a very sad day in both of our lives. And it's a sad day now. And the oil company had been bought. So I had Zippo to do. I was getting divorced, and I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. And I was 50. Very important, 50. And a friend of mine said, why don't you go interview at Christie's and Sotheby's? They're interested in hiring people like you. Why me? Well, because you know everybody, and you've been on the board of the Museum of Modern Art now for a while.
And on the board of Memorial Sloan.
And on the board of Memorial Sloan-Kettering, but it's the art connection that mattered. And so I tootled on down and interviewed in both houses.
Now, had you spent any time at Christie's and Sotheby's
No.
during this period of time?
No.
So this
Right
was
on.
this was like the charity situation also.
Yes.
Similar occurrence.
Yes.
You hadn't
Well,
been.
I'd been and bought a few things, but nothing serious, and never at auction, sort of leave a bid and things like that. No, it was brand new, fresh, as they say.
So you had both Christie's and Sotheby's looking at this
Yes.
entrepreneur?
Yes, and
Did you flip a coin to
no,
decide?
no. Sotheby's offered me a definitive job, and I think the people at Christie's had felt at the time that I was close to Alfred Taubman, and therefore the chances of me going anywhere else but there would have been slim.
How'd you meet Alfred?
Oh, I don't remember, but I knew him for a long time. I knew him in the late 70s, early 80s in New York and in Palm Beach. I used to play a lot of golf with Alfred and spent a lot of time with Alfred. I nicknamed him the uncle. And you know what? He was the uncle.
So you start over as a person who knows people.
Yes.
And how do you progress to vice chairman to chairman?
Well, I think what you do in those situations is you have to learn the business, of course. But the real business, my business anyway, was the contacts with people and being able to understand what services Sotheby's could give and take that concept to the people that you knew so that you could compete for business by bringing the talent that Sotheby's had to the people that might be interested in buying or selling. So the secret for someone like myself, who's not an expert, is to bring the experts to the client. We were able to do was offer appraisals to people, use that as a business tool to get to know the client more, to get experts in front of
So the appraisal was free or?
Yeah.
So this way, at least,
Yes.
it was the lead-in.
Well, you were giving someone
Something.
but at the same time you were getting to know them better, and you were giving the experts a chance to know the people better.
When did you become a master auctioneer?
I love the word master auctioneer. Let's go with just auctioneer.
No, I think it's, I have to be, you're too modest. You're considered a master auctioneer. You've done more charity auctions than probably most people in the world.
Maybe right. You are right.
Okay, so how do you become an auctioneer?
Well, I
won't call you a master auctioneer.
I told myself when I got there that it'd be fun to be an auctioneer. And I'd never done anything like that, other than a golf auction once in a while. I'd never done a real auction. So I told the lady in charge of Sotheby's I wanted to do it, and she said, "You're too old. You got so many people here who've been here for a long time who do auctions, and they've been doing it for 20 years. You'll never be able to catch up to them. I'll let you try, but it won't work." Anyway, just so you know, no one is just an auctioneer. Everyone has a day job. Auctioneering is separate in the sense that a lot of people would like to do it, but most people can't because they don't have the talent, or they don't have the will, or they don't want to learn, or all the kind of nice things, or they can't add. I mean, anything's possible. So I did it, and I wasn't very good at all. So someone had suggested that maybe I should take charity auctions to see if I can't learn how to do that, and I will find that regular auctions are a lot easier. So I went out and did charity auctions all over America. I took anything that anyone didn't want to do. And I found myself in all kinds of crazy places, and I went at it, and I was horrible.
We have that picture of you with Elton John.
Right. Well, that's years later. I was good by then. But seriously, it was hard. And, I was too slow. I wasn't numinative. I wasn't funny. I got nervous. I started sweating. It was a nightmare. But, gradually you got to learn how to do it. And then slowly but surely what would happen at Sotheby's is experts will say, "Why don't you take my morning jewelry sale?" or "Why don't you take my afternoon print sale?" And once you've done those charity auctions, standing there in a room full of people that had their catalogs, the mic works, the light's not in your face, the stuff's coming around on a turnstile, people are there for a purpose. That's a lot easier than going in front of a lot of people that are drinking who don't want or need the things that you're selling, which is a charity auction. So you, believe it or not, if you can do charity auctions well, you can do regular auctions really well.
Now, you said you've probably raised in charity auctions how much?
Over $500 million.
And
I stopped counting at $500 million.
Right, and you said there are two great stories.
Yeah.
One is you have to engage people, you told me, because
Right.
that's how you get them.
Right.
But people want to buy something that they can't really get.
Correct.
And like the Rayos thing is nothing because everybody can get it.
Rayos, it comes up. I've sold a bunch of
right,
tables. Yeah.
but you were saying the Navy SEAL thing was right.
Well, I mean, I think that one of the auctions I do is for the families of Navy SEALs that have been killed in action or killed in training. And I do one in Chicago and one in New York, if I continue to get asked, which I love doing. But there, what you're offering to the people is a chance not be taught by SEALs, but be trained for 3 or 4 days very much along the SEALs training program, might be offered by former SEALs or whatever, not current SEALs. And they'll teach you how to do the three things, which is air, land, and sea. If you choose the sea, you're probably going to get in the water, and you're going to have tanks, and you're going to swim underwater, and you're going to do all the things that SEALs do, or not. Or I don't think you're going to be jumping out of aircraft, but you're probably going to be taught how to jump off a tree and things like that, and how to shoot and all that kind of stuff. And that's money can't buy that.
You were telling me before the show that you performed at Caroline's Comedy?
I did.
Tell me about that.
Well, that was sort of, I don't know, looking back on it, I must have been insane. But there was a guy going around whose father-in-law I knew really well, and he billed himself as the funniest CEO. This is a guy who was a CEO of a small company, and he liked comedy. And he wrote his own stuff, and he put together some evenings at Caroline, whereby they would have 3 amateurs and 3 pros on Thursday night, and he would put together the amateurs, and they all had to be in business. So he was teeing up people who were not comedians to be there interspliced with people that are comedians in front of an audience at Caroline's, which was sold out, like 500 people. And I thought this was a terrible idea, and then found myself saying on that Monday, saying, "Oh, why not? I'll try it." And so, I did. And
you realize being an auctioneer is easier than being a stand-up.
Oh my God! And someone said, "You ever done it again?" I said, "Absolutely not." No, it was very difficult.
So let's talk about children and grandchildren.
Sure.
You have?
I have 2 daughters. One
Their
is
names and what are they?
Fernanda is my oldest child, and she's 44. And Eugenie is my youngest girl, and she's 42. And I have a grandson, which is Eugenie's son, who's 6. And I have a son-in-law who's called Nick Goodman. And he's sort of like Eugenie's age.
And now, as you said before, it's the next stage of your career.
Right. Now we're on to stage 5.
Stage 5. And
well, stage 5 is a little bit of a transition away from one career, which is the world of art. And I haven't abandoned the world of art.
No.
So what I decided when I retired from Sotheby's, which I did in June actually of this year, that there was a market out there for someone like myself that could help people sort of navigate the process of selling a work of art or some jewelry or wine, the 3 things that I kind of spent time doing at Sotheby's. And there are a whole lot of people that don't need me, who can do this without me. But there are a whole lot of people who can need me, because I can take their work of art and come back to the seller and say, this is what the choices are. Selling it at auction, selling it privately. And here are your options. And if you choose one of those options, then I can take you down that road, get proposals from the auction houses, get proposals from the dealers, and help you, hopefully, sell this work of art at a price that you agree to. And then if the event, that's a successful transaction, then I get paid a commission.
And you continue to do some charity auctions.
I continue to do charity auctions.
And one thing with like 10 seconds, one of the other charities that you really are involved with and you want to continue your work is with the Ralph Lauren Cancer Center with Dr. Freeman, correct?
Yes, well, I don't do auctions yet for them, but I'm sure there's going to be an opportunity to do something for the Ralph Lauren Cancer Center in Harlem. You bet.
Okay, so thank you for being here today.
Thank you, sir. That was fun.